The piano sat near the center of the hall, polished and bright under the soft lights. People passed by it all day, slowing their steps, listening when someone skilled sat down to play. The space was calm but busy, filled with quiet conversations, footsteps, and the occasional laugh. For most people, the piano was just another beautiful thing to admire from a distance. But for one man standing near the edge of the room, it meant much more than that. He stood still, hands folded in front of him, eyes fixed on the keys. His clothes were simple and worn, clean but clearly old. Nothing about him drew attention at first glance. If anything, people looked past him as they moved around the hall. He did not interrupt anyone or raise his voice. He simply watched, as if waiting for the right moment. Every time someone played the piano, his posture changed slightly. His shoulders lifted, his fingers twitched, and his face softened. It was clear that the sound reached him in a way it did not reach others. When the music stopped, he seemed to hold onto the silence, as though the notes were still floating in the air. After a long while, when the piano stood empty, he took a small step forward. Then another. His movements were careful, almost nervous. He stopped a few feet away, looking around as if making sure he was allowed to be there. A few people noticed him then. Some glanced at his hands, others at his face. No one spoke. He cleared his throat softly and approached the person responsible for watching over the piano. His voice was low and respectful. He asked if he could touch the piano, just for a moment. He did not explain why. He did not argue or demand. It sounded more like a quiet request than a question. The answer came quickly. No, the piano was not for everyone. It was expensive, delicate, and meant only for approved players. The response was polite but firm. Rules were rules. The man nodded right away. He said he understood. He stepped back without complaint. But he did not leave. He returned to his spot near the edge of the room and stood there again, watching. His expression showed disappointment, but not anger. He looked down at his hands, opening and closing his fingers slowly, as if testing something invisible. Then he looked back at the piano. Time passed. People came and went. Some noticed him standing there for so long and grew curious. A few whispered to each other. One person assumed he was waiting for someone. Another thought he might be lost. Someone else quietly joked that he probably wanted attention. None of them spoke to him directly. From where he stood, the man could see the piano clearly. He could see the shine of the keys and the faint marks left by years of playing. His eyes followed the shape of the instrument like he was reading a familiar story. Every so often, he moved his fingers again, gently pressing the air. Another player sat down and began to play. The sound filled the hall. The man closed his eyes. His breathing slowed. For a moment, it seemed like the outside world disappeared for him. When the music ended, he opened his eyes again, and something inside him seemed heavier. He took a breath and walked forward once more. This time, his steps were slower, more unsure. He spoke again, even softer than before. He repeated his request. He said he would be careful. He said it would only take a minute. The refusal came again. This time it felt colder, more final. There were glances from others now. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked annoyed. The man lowered his head and stepped back. His shoulders slumped slightly, but he still did not argue. He returned to his place, but now his eyes were wet. He blinked a few times and wiped his face with the back of his hand, hoping no one noticed. He took a deep breath and stood straight again. Whatever the piano meant to him, he was not ready to give it up. People continued to talk around him, but he stayed quiet. Someone nearby shook their head and muttered that rules existed for a reason. Another person said nothing but watched him closely, noticing the way he never touched anything, never crossed a line. Minutes turned into a long stretch of time. The man remained patient. His presence became part of the room, like a piece of furniture that no one questioned anymore. Yet there was something about him that slowly changed the mood. His calm, his silence, and his focus made people wonder. One person finally asked him why the piano mattered so much. The question was gentle, almost hesitant. The man paused before answering. He did not share many details. He only said that he used to play a long time ago. Life had taken many things from him, but the music never truly left his heart. That answer stayed in the air. Some people looked at his hands again, noticing the shape of his fingers, the slight stiffness, the faint signs of hard work and old practice. The piano stood between him and the crowd, untouched, waiting. He did not beg loudly. He did not make a scene. But in his quiet way, with his patience and honesty, he was asking for something deeper than permission. He was asking for a chance. As the room settled into another moment of silence, the man stood there, still and hopeful, unaware that his request had already begun to change the minds of those watching. And though he had been refused twice, something was slowly shifting, preparing the way for what would come next. The man stayed where he was, close enough to see the piano clearly, but far enough to avoid trouble. The room slowly returned to its normal rhythm. People talked again, footsteps echoed, and someone laughed near the entrance. Still, a quiet tension remained, as if something unfinished was hanging in the air. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Standing for so long made his legs ache, but he did not mind. His focus never left the piano. He watched how people treated it with care, how they admired it, how they respected it. He respected it too, maybe more than anyone there. A few people kept glancing at him. At first, the looks were quick and cautious. Then they became longer. Some were curious, some doubtful. One person whispered that he should stop hanging around. Another said he seemed harmless. The opinions were mixed, but the man said nothing. He rubbed his hands together slowly, trying to warm them. They were rough, marked by years of work that had nothing to do with music. Still, his fingers moved with a strange memory, stretching and curling like they remembered a shape his mind never forgot. Someone walked up to him and asked, not unkindly, why he wanted to play so badly. The man hesitated. He was not used to speaking about himself. When he finally spoke, his words were simple. He said music once helped him survive a difficult time. Playing the piano had been his escape, his peace, and his way of understanding the world. The person nodded but did not respond. They walked away, leaving the man standing alone again. Even so, the small conversation seemed to change something. A few others nearby had overheard. They looked at him differently now, not as a stranger, but as someone carrying a story. Another player approached the piano. The man stepped back out of respect, giving space without being asked. As the music began, he closed his eyes again. His head tilted slightly, following the rhythm. Anyone watching closely could see that he knew exactly where the music was going before it got there. When the song ended, a few people clapped. The player smiled and stood up. The piano was empty once more. The man took a breath. His heart beat faster this time. He did not want to ask again, but he felt something urging him forward. He walked toward the piano slowly, stopping before reaching it. He looked toward the person in charge, meeting their eyes with quiet honesty. He spoke carefully. He said he understood the rules. He said he did not want to cause problems. He only asked for a short moment, promising to treat the piano with respect. His voice did not shake, but the emotion behind it was clear. The answer did not change. The refusal was firm, almost uncomfortable. It was clear the conversation was over. A few people nearby sighed. Someone shook their head. Another person looked away, feeling awkward. The man nodded once more and stepped back. This time, the disappointment hit harder. He walked farther away and leaned against a wall. He stared at the floor, breathing slowly, trying to steady himself. His hands trembled slightly, and he pressed them together to stop the shaking. For a moment, it seemed like he might leave. Some people expected him to. They watched as he stood there, silent and still. But after a few minutes, he lifted his head again and looked back at the piano. He stayed. The room noticed. The longer he remained, the more questions filled the air. Why didn't he leave? Why was this so important to him? His patience began to speak louder than words. There was no anger in him, no sense of entitlement, just quiet determination. A few people began to feel uneasy about the earlier refusals. They remembered how often they themselves were judged by appearance or circumstance. Watching the man stand there so calmly made them uncomfortable with their own assumptions. Someone nearby mentioned that the piano had rules for a reason. Another replied that sometimes rules can be bent without harm. The discussion stayed quiet but meaningful. The man overheard none of it, or perhaps he chose not to react. He was lost in his own thoughts. Memories surfaced without warning. Late nights practicing in a small room. The sound of keys echoing in an empty space. Moments of hope, followed by years when music was pushed aside by survival. His eyes grew distant. If he could just touch the piano even without playing fully, it would mean something. It would remind him that a part of his old life still existed. Time passed again. The crowd shifted. Some people left. Others arrived. Yet the man remained, calm and steady. Finally, someone stepped closer to him. They asked when he last played. The man thought for a moment before answering. He said it had been many years. Life had not been kind, but he did not blame anyone. He only missed the music. That honesty landed softly but deeply. The person nodded and thanked him for answering. They walked back toward the piano, glancing at it with new eyes. The man returned to his quiet stance. He did not know it yet, but the mood around him was changing. Doubt was slowly giving way to curiosity. Judgment was beginning to soften. The piano remained untouched, waiting. And though he had been refused again, the man's calm presence was quietly building something stronger than permission. It was building trust. The air in the room felt different now. It was not loud or tense, but quieter in a deeper way. People were no longer just passing through. Many had slowed down, some had stopped completely. Their attention was not fully on the piano, and not fully on the man, but somewhere in between. He stood with his back straight, though fatigue was starting to show. His feet hurt. His hands were cold. Still, he stayed. There was something stronger than discomfort holding him in place. A person from the crowd watched him closely. They noticed how his eyes never wandered, how his body leaned slightly forward, as if pulled by an invisible thread. They had seen many people ask to play the piano before. Most did it with confidence or pride. This was different. This felt personal. The person stepped away for a moment and spoke quietly with the one responsible for the piano. Their voices were low, careful. Others noticed and leaned in, pretending not to listen. A few shook their heads. A few nodded slowly. No one raised their voice. The man waited, unaware of the small discussion happening nearby. He focused on his breathing, steady and controlled. He had learned long ago how to stay calm when things were uncertain. Life had taught him patience the hard way. The piano sat there, silent, its surface reflecting the lights above. It had waited through many songs and many hands. Now it waited again. Someone approached the man and asked him to step closer. The request caught him off guard. For a moment, he wondered if he was being asked to leave. His chest tightened slightly. Still, he followed without hesitation. He was told that he could touch the piano, but only briefly. No long performance. No risks. Just a short moment. The rules were spoken carefully, as if they could be taken back at any second. He nodded quickly, almost afraid that words might break the moment. Gratitude filled his face, quiet and sincere. He did not smile widely or celebrate. He simply said thank you. As he approached the piano, the room seemed to hold its breath. The crowd formed a loose circle, keeping a respectful distance. Some people crossed their arms. Some held their phones but did not press record. Others clasped their hands together, curious and unsure. The man stopped just before the bench. He looked at the piano closely, taking in every detail. The smooth surface, the keys lined up like old friends. His reflection stared back at him, older than he remembered, but still familiar. He placed one hand above the keys, hovering, not touching yet. His fingers trembled slightly. He closed his eyes for a brief second, then opened them again. When his fingers finally touched the keys, it was gentle. Almost too gentle. A single note sounded soft and clear. It echoed through the space, cutting through the noise of the world. He froze, listening. The sound seemed to travel through him, settling somewhere deep inside. His shoulders relaxed. His breathing slowed. Another note followed. Then another. At first, the music was quiet, uncertain. It felt like a question being asked rather than a statement being made. Some people exchanged looks, unsure of what they were hearing. It was not loud. It was not flashy. Then something shifted. The man's fingers began to move with more confidence. Not fast but sure. Each note connected smoothly to the next. The music started to form a shape, a story told without words. The room grew silent. Conversations stopped. Footsteps faded. Even the sounds from outside seemed to disappear. All that remained was the piano and the man. His face changed as he played. The tension he had carried for so long slowly melted away. His body leaned into the music, not forcing it, but following it. This was not a performance meant to impress. It was something remembered, something felt. People watched in disbelief. This was not what they had expected. They had prepared for awkward mistakes or simple notes. Instead, they were hearing control, emotion, and deep understanding. The man's hands moved as if they had never stopped playing. Years of silence had not erased the memory. It had only buried it, waiting for this moment. Some listeners felt a tightness in their chest. Others swallowed hard. A few wiped their eyes without fully realizing why. The music reached places words could not. The person who had refused him earlier stood still, unable to look away. Regret mixed with surprise. They had judged too quickly. They saw that clearly now. The man continued, unaware of the effect he was having. He was lost in the sound, guided by instinct and emotion rather than thought. Each note felt honest, unpolished, real. Time seemed to stretch. No one checked their phone. No one spoke. Then, as gently as it began, the music slowed. The final notes lingered in the air, fading softly. The man lifted his hands from the keys. Silence returned, heavier than before. For a brief moment, no one reacted. The crowd needed time to catch up with what they had just experienced. The man stood up slowly. He stepped away from the piano, his hands still trembling slightly. His eyes were moist, but his expression was peaceful. He did not bow. He did not look for approval. He simply nodded once, as if thanking the piano itself. Only then did the room respond. Quiet gasp, then a soft clap, then more. The sound of applause grew, not loud or wild, but full and sincere. People looked at each other, amazed by what they had witnessed. The man stood there, unsure of what to do. He had not expected this. He had only wanted a moment. And in that moment, everything had changed. The applause slowly faded, but the feeling it left behind stayed strong. People did not rush away. No one seemed in a hurry anymore. It was as if the music had gently asked everyone to pause and reflect. The man stood quietly, unsure where to place himself. He felt exposed in a way he had not expected. Playing the piano had opened something inside him, something he usually kept hidden. His hands rested at his sides, still warm from the keys. A few people stepped closer, careful not to crowd him. Their faces showed respect now, not doubt. Someone quietly said the music was beautiful. Another thanked him for sharing it. The man nodded in response, offering small smiles, but he did not speak much. Words felt unnecessary. The person responsible for the piano approached him. Their posture had changed. The firmness from earlier was gone, replaced by humility. They admitted they had been wrong to judge too quickly. They said they did not expect what they had just heard. The man listened, his head slightly lowered. He accepted the words with grace, not pride. He said there was no harm done. He understood why rules existed. His calm response surprised many who were listening nearby. Someone asked where he learned to play like that. The question made him pause. He looked at the piano again before answering. He said he learned when he was younger, during a time when music was the only thing that made sense. He practiced whenever he could, sometimes for hours, sometimes only for minutes. Life, he explained, had taken him in a different direction. People listened closely. His voice was steady, but there was weight behind it. He did not share every detail, only enough to explain that music once saved him from losing himself. Another person asked why he stopped playing. He hesitated again. He said responsibility came first. Survival came first. Music became something he carried quietly inside instead of something he shared. The crowd absorbed his words. Many saw their own sacrifices reflected in his story. Dreams set aside. Talents left unused. Moments lost to time. Someone suggested he play again. The idea hung in the air, tempting but uncertain. The man shook his head gently. He said one moment was enough. He did not want to push his luck or take more than he was given. Still, the piano seemed to call to him. The keys sat there, inviting, familiar. After a short pause, the person in charge offered him another chance, this time without strict limits. They said the piano was his for as long as he wished. The man looked surprised. He searched the faces around him, unsure if this was real. Seeing only encouragement, he nodded slowly. He sat down again, this time more comfortably. His posture was relaxed, natural. He took a moment before playing, resting his hands on his knees, breathing in the quiet. When he began again, the music was different. It was lighter in some places, heavier in others. It carried joy, pain, memory, and hope all at once. Each note felt intentional, honest. People leaned in closer, drawn by the sound. Some closed their eyes. Others smiled softly. The music told a story of struggle and endurance, of loss and quiet strength. The man's fingers moved freely now, no longer hesitant. He allowed himself to feel everything he had held back for years. The piano became a bridge between who he was and who he had become. As the music flowed, the crowd grew larger. People passing by stopped, curious about the sound. They felt something special was happening and did not want to miss it. The person who had first questioned allowing him to play stood nearby, watching closely. They saw not just skill but honesty. They realized how easy it is to overlook greatness when it does not arrive dressed as expected. The man ended the second piece gently, letting the final note fade into silence. This time, the applause came faster, stronger, but still respectful. It was not about excitement. It was about appreciation. He stood up slowly and stepped away from the piano again. This time he felt lighter. The weight he had carried for so long had shifted. People approached him once more, offering kind words and quiet encouragement. Someone asked if he ever considered playing again. Somewhere public, somewhere people could hear him. He smiled thoughtfully. He said he did not know. For now, he was grateful for this moment. It had reminded him of who he was before life became so heavy. The crowd began to thin, but the feeling remained. Conversations were softer. Movements were slower. Everyone seemed changed in some small way. The man prepared to leave. He took one last look at the piano, his eyes filled with gratitude. He touched the edge lightly, not to play, but to say goodbye. As he walked toward the exit, people made space for him. Some nodded. Some smiled. A few clapped quietly once more. He stepped outside, carrying the echo of the music with him. He did not know what would come next, but he knew one thing for certain. The piano had given him more than sound that day. It had given him himself back. The night air felt cooler when he stepped outside, but it was a welcome change. The noise of the street greeted him, ordinary and steady, as if nothing special had happened inside. He paused for a moment, standing near the entrance, letting his thoughts settle. His hands still felt the shape of the keys. The sound of the piano lingered in his ears like a gentle echo. He began to walk, slow at first, then a little faster. Each step felt lighter than the last. The weight he had carried for years did not disappear completely, but it loosened its grip. He realized that the music had not judged him. It had accepted him exactly as he was. Behind him, inside the hall, people continued to talk about what they had witnessed. Some replayed short videos on their phones. Others simply tried to describe the feeling with words, though most struggled to do it justice. A few admitted they had expected nothing when he first asked to touch the piano. That realization stayed with them, uncomfortable but honest. The person responsible for the piano remained thoughtful long after the crowd thinned. They replayed the moment of refusal in their mind, then the sound of the first note. They understood now that protecting rules should never mean closing doors without listening. The piano had been safe all along. What had been at risk was something else entirely. As the man walked, memories followed him. Not painful ones this time, but softer images. A small room filled with music late at night. Fingers pressing keys with purpose. A younger version of himself believing that anything was possible. For years, those memories had felt distant. Now they felt close again. He stopped at a bench along the sidewalk and sat down. He rested his hands on his knees and looked up at the sky. The city lights blurred slightly as his eyes filled, but he did not wipe them away. There was no need to hide anymore. He thought about how close he had come to leaving earlier that day. How easy it would have been to walk away after the second refusal. If he had done that, the moment would have never existed. The thought made him smile softly. Inside the hall, someone suggested inviting him back someday. Another wondered where life had taken him and what he might do next. There were no clear answers, but the questions themselves felt hopeful. The man stood up again and continued walking. He did not know where the road ahead would lead. He did not suddenly have a plan or a promise. What he had was something quieter but stronger. He had proof that a part of him still worked, still mattered. The next morning, he woke up with a strange calm. The usual worries were there, but they felt smaller. As he went about his day, he noticed how often his fingers moved without thought, tapping tables, tracing patterns, remembering melodies. He found himself stopping near a small store that sold used instruments. He did not go inside right away. He just stood there, looking through the window. The idea felt both exciting and frightening. After a moment, he walked on. He was not rushing anything. Word of what happened continued to spread, not loudly, but steadily. People shared the story not because it was dramatic, but because it reminded them of something human. It reminded them that talent can hide behind silence, and that patience can change outcomes. Some days later, he returned to the same area. This time, he did not stand at the edge. He walked with more confidence, not because he expected anything, but because he no longer doubted himself. A familiar face noticed him and waved. A few people smiled in recognition. The piano was there again, quiet and waiting. He did not rush toward it. He watched from a distance, content simply knowing it was there. Eventually, someone invited him to play. The invitation was gentle, without pressure. He accepted, feeling calm rather than nervous. When he sat down, the keys felt familiar, welcoming. He played again, not to prove anything, but to share. The music flowed naturally, unforced. People listened, not because of surprise this time, but because they wanted to. Afterward, he spoke with a few listeners. He laughed more easily. He listened as much as he talked. There was no spotlight, no sudden fame, just connection. As days turned into weeks, music slowly found its place in his life again. Sometimes it was a piano. Sometimes it was only memory. Either way, it stayed close. The man understood now that the moment he begged to touch the piano was not about the piano at all. It was about asking the world to see him, even briefly. And when it finally did, it changed him. He continued forward, carrying the lesson quietly. Not everyone would listen. Not every door would open. But some would. And sometimes that was enough. The piano remained where it was, ready for the next pair of hands, the next hidden story. And somewhere beyond the noise of daily life, the sound of that single moment lived on, reminding everyone who heard it that wonder often appears when least expected.